Hi, Dave Scotland for cgswot.com, and today is a tutorial that is part of one of the workshops that we've got available at the moment. And what I've done is just selected one of the parts. It is actually an 8-hour step-by-step video tutorial to do the space chase sequence, and this is the actual, or one of the scenes. It's two scenes that are actually done in the workshop. One is this wide angle shot, and the other is sort of a chase cam with a camera positioned roughly around the cockpit area of the second ship in the scene. And basically what we're going to have a look at today is the engine flames that are coming out of the back of the ships, and we'll be in 3D Studio Max, and I'll be showing you how to set up a sort of an automated animation cycle to put on those engine flames, and how to create them out of the back of the ships there, and we'll be stepping through that process. Now, as I said before, it's only one small part of a very large workshop that encompasses a lot of different effects. There's particles, we do batch rendering, the full compositing side of things is done in the workshop as well. We basically animate the ships. We take the ships as a singular asset, and we set them up ready to animate in the larger scene, in the overall main scene. And then we animate the ships through a path, we animate the camera, we animate the background with the asteroids, we create the asteroids. Basically everything you see on the screen here is created from scratch during the workshop. So you will learn tons of stuff, and I thoroughly suggest that you have a look at the end product and have a look at the details. You can find, I'll just stop that now. You can find all the details in the product section of the site under workshops, and it's the Space Chase Complete workshop there, and there's plenty of details for exactly what is covered in the workshop, and I thoroughly suggest that you have a look at it. But for today's tutorial, we're going to take a look at creating those engine flames, or those jet flames out the back of the ship asset. And this is an excerpt, or a sneak peek, so to speak, of the overall complete workshop. So enjoy. Okay, so the first asset we need to get ready for our effect shot is the fighter, the space fighter here. And this is just a simple model. This exercise is not about modeling, so please forgive the simplicity of the model. It renders, it's got enough detail to sort of catch the lighting and give a bit of detail when we get it into our scene. And what we need to do to prepare this ship for the effect shot that we need to achieve is to create some flame effects that need to go at the back of the ship, and we also need to create some interactive lighting, and we'll start off by creating the geometry for the flames. And just before we start, we need to check the scale of the ship to make sure that it's the right scale. And given that we have to create virtually an entire universe, we've got to make sure that our scale is not too big. Max does have some limits to the extent at which you can zoom out of a scene, and it does have some boundaries, and we need to make sure that we're going to be able to fit everything into that scene, and maintain the parallax that we need for the far distant objects and our close objects. So the easiest way to check the scale of something is just to create a box. So we're just going to go into wireframe here. We're going to create a box around our object, and then in a front view we'll just check the height there. Just bring that back down, and it looks like that box is encapsulating our object pretty well. And now we can come into the modifier stack, and 1400 centimeters, I think that's going to be fine. So in realistic terms, it's about 14 meters in length, and I think that's a little on the large side. So what we're going to do is sort of factor 10 this down. If this was a single man fighter, we can envisage that it would be around about 10 metres in length, and would have a width of just under, maybe about 8.5 metres or something like that. So let's type some values into our box dimensions here, and we're going to go 10 metres, but we're going to factor 10 it down. So we're just going to make it 1 metre in length, and in width we're going to go with 80 centimetres, and in height, probably about 30 centimetres. And you'll see that that's our box there. Now we need to select everything in the scene, come in here, deselect the box, which is, and we do that by alt clicking. So we'll make sure we've got everything except for the box selected there, and we have. And we're going to scale down. We'll just make sure we're in a top view there. We're going to uniformly scale down until the ship fits inside that box. And that's probably close enough there. I think that's going to do us quite nicely. We'll just go to a grid. What we're going to do is just align this ship up to the center, the world center there. And that's going to be fine. So we can now get rid of our box, our reference box, and we'll just go to a front view and make sure that that's aligned properly, and it is. Okay, so we've got our ship there, and that scale that I was talking about, as long as you're aware that that's where you're heading with the scale, as you move forward and create other assets and other scenes, you will be working to a sort of a smaller scale. And as I said, that's simply because we have such a big universe or solar system to create that we want to make sure we've got enough space in 3D Max to do it. Now, even though I'm using 3D Max for this project, most, if not all, of the processes that I'll be going through to prepare the scene and to create the scene for that compositing element can be done in just about any 3D package, especially Maya, Lightwave, XSI. No problems at all in replicating these processes in whatever package you happen to be using. So this is more of a compositing process, but we're preparing everything for the effects that we need to achieve. Okay, so we need to create some geometry for the flames, and we're going to do that by just going to a front view, and we're going to create a sphere just out on one of these wing engines. And so we'll go into a sphere creation and drag one out, roughly the same, just a little bit smaller than the actual engine itself. If we go to a top view, we can see that we've got our sphere there, and what we're going to do is reposition it to the back and just line it up. And we can even use the align tool to align it to this jet cone piece of geometry, and XYZ align, that's fine. And then we can just sort of pull it back a little bit, and that way we know that it's aligned in X and Y space. Okay, so what we need to do is make sure the sphere has enough segments, and 32 is a little low given that we're going to use a bit of noise on our sphere, and we want to make sure we've got enough segments to hold the noise. 46 is about right, I think. And we can now add a modifier of an edit poly and select the vertex sub mode, click the very top vertice, and then we're going to slide down and look for our soft selection tab, and we're going to switch on soft selection. We're going to wind the fall off just until we get that light blue color at the bottom there, and you can tell you've got enough because as you start to move it, it's sort of all of the vertices move, but the blue ones move less than the red ones, and that's going to give us what we need. So the shape, if I drag that out, you'll see that the shape's a little bit curved over at the top, and we need to have it sort of pinched a little bit at the top. So we can increase the pinch setting just to give us that shape, and then just give it a little bit of bubble. And now we need to just adjust our fall off, something like that, and drag back. and that's probably enough. The proportions look just about right, and I think that's going to be fine. Now what we can do is go into our hierarchy tab, effect pivot only, and what we want to do is just drag that pivot point to the tip of the sphere or the object right there. Okay, and we'll just go to a front view and make sure that pivot point is right in the center, and it is. So that's going to be fine. So we've got a basic geometry for our flame. And so let's go ahead and give it some noise, some detail. So with the edit poly, go into the vertice selection mode and select that very top vertice which we've got there, and now just wind the soft selection fall off up until we come down the object, and what we want is almost all the way down except for the base, and that's going to do fine. That's what we're shooting for right there. We're leaving these base vertices untouched by that selection, and that's going to hold that shape down here at the base. So with that selected and highlighted here in the stack, we're going to add a noise modifier, and what that will mean is that the noise modifier will only be applied to the selected vertices. And we're going to crank down the scale. We're going to go down to about 10, and we'll leave fractal unticked there, and it's the Z axis that we need to increase. So let's wind that up until we get something that is starting to look. We'll probably bring that back a little bit, and then just bring the scale down, and you'll see that we start to get this broken up flame effect. It's probably a little bit big on the amount. Let's bring that back a little bit. So about 50 should be fine. And now we can just bring the scale down a little bit more, and you can see the effect that we're starting to get there, and it's got that nice sort of flame pattern. And at the moment, if I drag, you'll notice that there's a keyframe that's been placed at frame 0 and the end frame here, and that's for animation, and the noise modifier does that by default, but it won't actually be in place until you click the toggle here to animate the noise. And now you'll see that we have noise animated, and that's going to work quite nicely for what we're going for. And the first thing you'll realize is that it's not a linear noise. It starts to build up speed, and then it slows off at the end, and that's because of this key type that we've got set up in the interface down here as the default. So every key you create for animation, it gives it a default key, and at the moment I've got mine set up to these auto tangents, and we want linear keys. So if we right click and bring up curve editor, and I'll just resize this in the window. What we're looking for in curve editor is we want to come down to the modifier for the sphere 01 that we've just created, and we want to look for noise, and we want to come all the way down to phase. And phase is what is animating, which is over here, you can see in the modifier stack. And we want to select, you can see those curves, and that's what's causing that sort of ramp in and ramp out of the animation. And we want them linear, so we're going to select both of the keyframes, and then we're going to click on the set tangents to linear, just to give them a linear shape. And now we're going to go into the controller, out of range types, and select linear, so that now when we bring this asset into our main scene, the animation that we've set up is just going to continue on forever. It's not just going to stop when it gets to that last keyframe. And it's not just going to stop when it gets to that last keyframe. So that's the process really of setting up a loopable sort of animation. We're going to use that throughout the setting up of this ship. And it's a little bit messy to look at in the viewport here, and we're going to fix that by just adding a modifier of a poly select. And that's just going to deselect those soft selected polys with the noise, just so that we can see what we're doing here. I'm just going to change the swatch color to closer represent what we're looking for. And so we've got that animation, and if I just sort of scrub between 1 and 24, which is 1 second, and to check that, we're just going to click on the time configuration button down here and make sure we're set to film as the frame rate, because this entire project is going to be at 24 frames per second and film frame rate. And we're also going to, so we'll go OK to that, but we're also going to grab our keyframe and drag it back to 100, and that for starters is going to speed up this animation that we have, but it's also going to get rid of a lot of these excess keyframes that we don't really need. So if we go back into that time configuration and just set the length to 100, and that should be fine. That's going to give us a 100 frame loop, and that's going to work nicely when we bring this asset into the main scene. So the next thing we need to do is apply a material to it. In fact, just before we move on, I'm going to bring up my curve editor, and I'm just going to increase. We're looking down in the modifier again, going into noise, and we're going to select that last keyframe, and at the moment it's set to 200. I'm going to increase that to 300 just to give it a bit more speed. A little bit more happening in a shorter time period, and that's going to give us that randomness that we're looking for. Okay, we'll give it a material, so hit M and bring up your material editor. These are the materials that are just applied to the ship, so we'll just clear those. We don't really need to deal with those. And in the first material swatch, we're just going to rename it LG Flame for large flame. And to start with, we'll just give it a stand-in colour of a blue, sort of a light blue with a hint of green in there, and that's going to be fine. We're going to apply that to our geometry, and then we're going to go into our opacity settings. We can turn up our self-illumination to 100. That's going to work fine. In the opacity settings, we'll click the radio button there, and we're going to select gradient ramp. And we're just going to click on the Show Standard Map in Viewport button, and you can see that I'll just get rid of that flag in the middle by dragging off the edge, and it should disappear. We can see that our mapping is not in the direction that we want, and I believe it could be the W. If we just go 90, that should be it, and we can test it by just dragging a black flag up here and a white flag down there, just to give us a harder noise, and that's working nicely. We can see now in the viewport that we're getting that fall off at the start here. Now black is see-through and white is fully visible. And so what we want is a bit of a build-up of visibility from the back of the engine here, and we're going to do that by creating a nice fall off in here. And so we're going to get a nice fall off. It's going to build up a little bit, something like that. Probably bring that out just a tad, something like that. And then right at the very end here, and we're just going to click and drag in a new flag, and then on the very last one, we'll double click, bring up our color selector, and make it black. And what that's going to do is I'll explain that as we put a UVW map on the object. So we can go ahead and do that now, and just minimize material editor. We're going to, above the poly select, I'm going to add a UV, it's just off screen for you, but it's in the stack, UVW map, and we're going to give it a cylinder UVW map. And what we're going to do is we're just going to scale it, the modifier, the gizmo for the UVW map, we're just going to scale it down just a bit. We'll make sure we're in local transform mode. We're just going to scale it just a bit, and then we're going to move it back towards the engine. And what that does is, you'll notice here that we have some flames extending out beyond the gizmo, and that frame there's a good example. If I render that now, you'll see that we're getting these little licks of flame out the back there. And there's another example at that keyframe. And that's going to give us a very nice effect as we render this and put it through the effects in After Effects later on in compositing. Now the fall off is a little bit harsh back here, and I want it a lot closer to the engine. So we're going to grab that material, bring up the material editor, and just drag that fall off back towards the engine a bit. Make it a little bit tighter, and give that a quick render. We'll see how we go with that. Now you'll see I've got some deformities happening on the ship that shouldn't be there. Now this is something that you always need to be aware of when playing with scales, and we've scaled this ship right down. Now if I select this pod on the edge, you'll see that it has a V-Ray displacement mod, and it's the only reason why I'm using V-Ray in this scene, is that I'm using V-Ray displacement because it's very quick to render. It's much quicker than a scanline displacement placed in the material. But it is actually done on size, on relative centimeters, and this figure here doesn't scale down. This amount here that's set to 2 centimeters doesn't scale down when we scale an object in the viewport. So what we need to do is find the amount of displacement that suits the size of the object that we're dealing with here now. Now remember that we scaled this object down to about 100 centimeters. So this 2 centimeter is really if I give that a quick render, you'll see that the detail that is coming from the displacement map is really blowing that out. And I mean, that's not a bad effect if that's what you're shooting for, but we need to scale this back now. So I'm just going to bring it back to about 0.2 centimeters, and then negative 0.2 centimeters in the shift. Give that a quick render, and you'll find that that's going to give us the detail that we want on that pod. And I think you'll find on the main fuselage and on the canopy area, it's also going to be a little bit out of whack, and it is. So just with the fuselage, we're going to bring that back down also to about 0.25. We'll go minus 0.25, and probably the fuselage here as well, sorry, the canopy. It's probably not too bad, but we'll leave it uniform, 0.25 and negative 0.25. And so now we should have something a little closer to what we should have with that nacelle detail. And we've just got to do the other side now, so we'll just make sure we've got the right settings. It's 0.2 and minus 0.2 for these engines, and so this one should be 0.2 and minus 0.2. Okay, so that should take care of that little glitch, and we'll move on now to duplicating this object. And so we've got that happening there. It's going to work nicely. The animation is moving. We can probably open up, or just in the material editor, we can probably open this end flag a little wider, and we'll just go okay to that, and we'll bring the UVW map, we'll just make sure that it's highlighted here, and we're just going to scale it back up just a bit, and then move it back out just a little bit. Maybe something like that's fine, and we'll just give that a test render and see how that's looking. Yeah, that's going to work fine. I think the noise can have a little bit more, bring the scale down just a little bit more. Just make it a little bit rougher, and probably bring the sides up just slightly, and that should, we'll go back up to the top of the stack here and make sure that that's working nicely, and that's going to work. You can see there it's looking good. Okay, now in the material editor, we just need to fix our diffuse now. So what we're going to do is right click on the swatch, the color swatch here, that's the little light blue color, and we're going to copy. Now we're going to click on the radio button, we're going to select noise, We're going to make it a fractal noise. We'll make sure that it's an explicit map channel, and we're going to make the size probably 0.25 is fine. That's going to give us a nice material there. We can always switch the viewer to a cylinder, and that'll give us a bit closer representation of what we're looking at. And we can click on the black color swatch, right click, and paste. That's going to paste the blue material in there, and what we can do is just bring these high and low values a little closer together, and that's going to crunch out the contrast a little bit and give us a little bit more contrast. And we'll probably crunch down the V value just so that it sort of goes along the length. We'll go maybe 0.1 or something. Yep, and it's going to give us our material along the length there. And we'll come down a little bit smaller. We'll go 0.15 in the size. Now, if we just give that a quick render, you'll see that we're getting that material moving. The noise is sort of oriented down the length of that, and that's going to show up really nicely when we apply some effects in post-production. So the last thing we need to do with this nacelle here with this flame is to try to give it some animation that's random and loopable as well, and we'll do that by animating the phase. So what we're going to do is at frame 0, come through to frame 100, and then switch on the animation toggle down here, the auto key, and then wind up your phase to 8. And then come back to frame 0, and make sure that goes back to 0, and it does. And that means we're animating the phase from 0 to 8. And you can see in the little swatch here how that's working. And it's going to give us some really nice variation and random variation. And switch off your auto key. Now right click, bring up your curve editor, because we need to make that loopable. And so with the you can see it's Sphere 01, and we've got LG Flame as the material down here, and we're just going to open that up and come into maps, and we're looking for that diffuse color map, and you'll see phase is highlighted there, and they're the keyframes. And we want to select both the keyframes, switch them to linear, and then controller, out of range types, and linear. And that's going to continue on forever, and it won't matter where the asset sits in our master scene. It's just going to continue animating, and that's going to look good. Okay, so we're looking pretty good now, and we need to duplicate this material. So we'll just give it one more. Just go back into M, bring up M for material. Come back out to the top level, which is LG Flame here, and then just switch on Show Standard Map in Viewport, and that's just going to help us visualize that it's how it should look in the render later on. Okay, so that's fine. We'll just close down the material editor. We're going to go to a top view, and we're going to shift drag over to the other engine, and as a copy, we'll go OK, and we're just going to come in here, wireframe mode. I'm using F3 to switch to wireframe mode, and we're just going to line that up, and that's working fine. And it looks like it's a little bit too far out from the engine there, and so we're going to bring it back and just line it up with the outside of this darker tube shape object here, and just bring it forward a little bit. That's probably it there, and we'll just go to a top view and make sure the other one is the same. Yeah, and it is. It's a little bit too far forward. I'm just going to bring that back and line that up, and that looks good. Now we'll go to a top view, and then straight away if I render that, you'll see that they're identical. They're absolutely identical, and we don't want that, so we can fix that, and this is the reason why we used a copy and not an instance. We can go into the noise modifier and just change the seed. So I'm just going to punch in 3 for the seed on that one now, and you'll see now that we have a random and they're both have their own unique noise, and that's exactly what we want for those. So that's going to work fine. So we're ready now to duplicate another couple for these inner maneuvering thrusters inside here. And what we can do is we'll grab our first one there and we'll shift drag over to the center one here as a copy. And we're just going to line up the pivot point just inside that thruster. We're going to go to a front view wireframe just so that because it's this one down here, and we're just going to bring it down and line it up with that that shape. We're going to go to a top view, and we're going to uniformly scale on all three axes down to something about that size. Oh, probably a little bit bigger. That's probably it there. And then once we've got it to the right dimensions uniformly, we're just going to scale in the thickness of it, which is these two axes here, and we're just going to bring it in. And that's probably what we're looking for there. Now, because we've done that, we need to just reposition it a bit. We need to just bring it in a little. And if I give that a quick render and see how that's working. And that's going to work nicely. Okay, so in the brief, it calls for blue sort of futuristic alternative fuel source out here on the big thrusters, but down in the center ones, they're more traditional flames. So what we can do is just go into our material edit again. We're going to drag that material to a new swatch. We'll rename that to small flame, and then we're going to change the color to a reddy orange, something like that. And then we're going to right click and copy that color, come into the noise, right click on the blue and paste that orange on there. And then in the white swatch, we're going to give it a really bright yellow. And then we can apply that material. And so there it is. It is there. We'll just make it visible in the viewport here. I'll switch off the... okay, so there we have our materials. They're our flames, and they're all uniquely, randomly animated. And now we can just grab this guy here, and we're going to shift drag to the left and line it up with that other thruster. And that's it there. And then in a front view, it needs to come up, line up with that thruster shape. That's it there. And once that's in place, we can shift drag to the right and line it up with the other one. And we'll go okay to that. And now in a top view, you'll see that we have three identical flames, and we need to make them unique. So grab the first, this one here, we're going to go into the noise, make the seed 5. This one here, we'll go into the noise, make the seed 7. And we'll go into this one here and into the noise, and we'll make the seed 9. And so now we have 3 uniquely moving flames. Okay, so that's the geometry set up for our asset, for our ship asset. And the next thing we need to do is create some interactive lighting, and we want to make that loopable and self-contained in this jet fighter rig, so that when we bring it in, it's all taken care of and we don't have to worry about it in our main scene. So we'll go ahead and create the interactive lighting.